This is the continued story of the book I Saw God's Hand by E.L. Martin, as retold to the children of the Watertown SDA Church Primary Sabbath School. I'm your storyteller, Austin Bacchus. Let's go.
Because of my experience as a sawmiller and engineer, my first assignment when I arrived at Batuna, which is the headquarters in the Solomon Islands, was to catch up with a backlog of boat repairs and major overhauls, and to install 2 new diesel engines in some 45-foot boats. The sawmill was at a standstill. Things had been delayed for a long time. Our mission engineer was Hubert Barham, and his health had broken. He was getting malaria every few days. So when I arrived to take the load off Brother Barham's shoulders, this meant a lot to him. He requested that he could stay on for 3 months before going back to Australia permanently so he could help me catch up in the work first. We had so much work I hardly knew where to begin. Early each morning, the sawmill crew and I would pour out timber from the mill. Then while the boys were stacking all the cut timber, Brother Barham and I concentrated on the engineering. Sleep would come very easily after a heavy day's toil, but one night, after we had been at Batuna for a week or so, I was awakened in the dead of night by a voice that seemed to say, "Jenny is in financial difficulty back at Avondale College." I got out of bed, and by my bedside I told the master that even if Jenny was in distress, well, there was nothing I could do. I was still 5 months in debt from all the money that I had received in advance before we came out from Australia. I climbed back in bed. I was unable to sleep for quite a long while, for the voice seemed so vivid. Sleep came at last, but after a few minutes I woke again hearing the voice, "Jenny is in financial difficulty back at Avondale College." Although my wife and I knew Jenny well, she wasn't even a particularly close friend of ours, and I knew very little about her financial position. I hadn't even thought of her after leaving college. But the voice was so distinct and loud and clear that on my knees I told the master I would try to work out some way to help her. So early the next morning, I went to the office of Pastor Barrett, the secretary-treasurer for the mission. I asked him, would it be possible for him to let me have some money to send to Australia? Now, he was a kindly Christian man, and he kindly reminded me that I was already very much in debt to the mission. However, when I told him of the experience during the night, he readily agreed to give me whatever I asked for. I didn't have the courage to ask him for more than just $25, which was already more than a week's wages. Later on in the morning, Brother Barham came down to the workshop. I asked him, would he mind when he goes back to Australia in a few weeks to deliver some money to a young woman at the college? He told me he'd be happy to do so. When I told him my experience during the night, he said, "Oh, Elwin," that's Pastor Martin's first name, Elwin, "do you mind if I add to your 25? For I always pay a second tithe, and I have some money that could be added to yours." So his amount almost doubled the gift we were going to send. Some 2 months later, we bade farewell to Brother and Sister Barham. Now, pay attention. A lot of time is passing by here, right? God sends him this prayer and this message in the night, telling him that this woman needs help back at the college. Months are going by before he can even start sending the money to her. But let's see what happens. My parting words after thanking Brother Barham for helping me to catch up on so much work were, I wanted him somehow to get the money to Jenny, but she must never know where it came from. And he agreed to keep the secret. Some 3 months later, I received a short note from Brother Barham in which he said he had delivered the money. And that was it for a while. Often during the years, I wondered whether I would ever hear what happened. When at last we returned to Australia for our furlough, I made my way to the college in case Jenny was still there. It didn't take me long to find her, and I cautiously asked questions about how college was going. Jenny replied, "Oh, wonderful! I graduate this year." Really though, the year that you folks left for the Solomon Islands was the saddest but the most wonderful year in my life. I asked her to tell me all about it, and here was her story. Shortly after we left for the Solomons, Jenny received a telegram from her father saying her mother had died and she was to return home immediately. Apparently, Jenny's mother used to work long hours just trying to raise sufficient money to keep her girl at college. The husband, who was a businessman, was bitterly opposed to Jenny and her mother and their religion and refused to pay any money to help for her college. Jenny got back home just in time to see her mother laid to rest in the grave. Her father greeted her with the words, "Well, that's what Bible lovin' gets ya," he said as he pointed to the casket. Early the next morning, on the Sabbath, Jenny was awakened by her father, who told her, "You will not be going back to college. You're going to stay here and work in my office, and you will be working on Saturday. You can just forget about all your silly religious beliefs." Jenny answered, "Daddy, I can't work on Sabbath." This enraged her father, who said, "Get dressed, have your breakfast, and I'll be back in an hour or so to take you to my office." And with that, he stormed out of the house. Jenny got dressed as quickly as possible and hurried to the nearby neighbor's house and told them what had happened. They replied, "Jenny, we can't do much to help you, but if you will help, we can give you enough money for train fare back to Avondale." Looking at the clock, they found that they had barely 20 minutes to catch the train. Because she hadn't unpacked her suitcases, she just closed them up, hurried by car to the railway station, and within half an hour was on her way back to the college, never even saying goodbye to her father. Soon after Jenny arrived back at the college, there were all sorts of threatening letters from her father. But the greatest worry that faced her now was, how was she going to pay her college fees? Her mother was dead. She had no way of raising the money. Within a matter of weeks, the red figures began to mount until at last she was summoned to see the principal. He advised her she must do something about paying the money. Jenny told me that though she worked every available minute she could between studying and going to classes, the amount she owed continued to climb. She was called to the principal's office again. This time he advised her, "Try to get a full-time job until you can get your finances sorted out." Apparently, she was unable to find employment. And of course, she felt it was impossible to go back home to her father either. A few more weeks passed before the principal told Jenny that she, along with a number of other students, must stop coming to the college for now until she could pay the money that was owed. She was to catch the school bus early the next morning for whatever destination she wanted to go to. Jenny told me how she spent that whole night crying and praying, for she had nowhere to go. Toward daylight, however, peace came into her soul. She lay down on her bed exhausted and heard nothing more until mid-morning, when she was again summoned to the principal's office. After hurriedly freshening up, she ran down the stairs, and as she was going out the door of the women's dormitory, one of her friends called, "Oh, there's a letter for you in the letter box, Jenny." She paused for a moment, grabbed the envelope, and within minutes she was confronted by the principal, who asked her a stern question. "Why didn't you catch the bus today along with the other students who left this morning?" Jenny burst into tears, and try as she could, she was unable to refrain from crying brokenheartedly. The principal, who was a kindly man, said, "Jenny, don't feel so bad about things. Surely the Lord has a purpose for your life as he has for mine." He then suggested that they kneel in prayer together. While still on their knees, the principal paused halfway through his prayer and said, "Jenny, I'm feeling impressed to ask you, what's in your hand?" She replied, "Nothing." So the principal continued praying, and then he paused again and said, "Jenny, what's in your hand?" Nothing except this envelope I picked up on the way over to your office." The principal suggested that she should open the letter, for maybe it contained an offer for employment somewhere. With trembling hands, Jenny broke the seal, and there was an amount of money. Not 1 penny more or 1 penny less than the exact amount that she owed to the college. Some months later, when I met up with Brother Barham, who had delivered the money, I asked him, how did he deliver the money to Jenny? He said, "Oh, don't you worry about it. No one saw me deliver it. As a matter of fact, one cold wintry morning, right before daylight, I borrowed a bicycle, rode to the college, and snuck into the women's dormitory and put the letter in the letterbox." To me, it seems evident that from the very moment that Brother Barham placed the letter in the letterbox, heavenly peace flooded Jenny's heart, for the Master knew that we had not failed him in our small part in his great plan. After listening to the amazing story that Jenny told me, I asked her, did she have any idea where the money came from? She replied, "Oh, yes, I do. I'm almost positive. It must have come from Pastor Stewart." I heartily agreed. "Oh, yes, that sounds like just the kind of thing Pastor Stewart would do." And as far as I know, Jenny still thinks the money came from Pastor Stewart, and I trust she always will. I make no secret of the fact that the whole experience put me on my knees, humbling me to the dust. To think, some 3 months before Jenny's crisis, my master had spoken to me 2,000 miles away in the Solomon Islands and basically said, "Elwin, if you want to have a small part in my program, you better do it now." Then, because I didn't have enough money, he impressed Brother Barham to add to mine, not making the amount less or more than the amount that was required by his child in Australia. And he got it there not a day too early and not a day too late. I marvel that Heaven's King, the creator of the universe, would use me, a frail child of the dust, to have just a little part in his wonderful plan. Jenny graduated that year with flying colors and gave a number of years of service in our missionary work.
Be sure to tune in next time for more stories from the book I Saw God's Hand by E.L. Martin. And meanwhile, feel free to check out these videos as well as others on my YouTube channel with many more mission and Bible stories for kids and adults. God bless you.